Hi, folks. We are in Frankenstein, Volume 3 of the 1818 edition, looking today at chapters 3 through 4. I debated between two titles for this section. First, in this section, Victor breaks the deal, and we start to get the results of him breaking that deal. But also, you could look at these chapters, especially the latter part of chapter 3 through chapter 4, as no justice for Clerval, which is reminiscent, of course, of the earlier incident with Justine in I can't remember the chapter, but it's Volume 1, the first part of Volume 1. Go look it up. Anyhow, remember the deal is that Victor and the creature have made a deal with each other. If Victor will create a mate, a female for the creature, then they will leave Victor and his family, and in fact, all of mankind alone. They'll go off. Victor is impressed with that eventually. He kind of goes back and forth. He debates and he decides, all right, the monster deserves a mate, and that will solve the problem. So Victor decides to create a female for the monster. He and Henry go off on a trip, and this trip actually lasts quite a bit of time. Because you remember that Victor told Elizabeth he'd be gone for 2 years, adding to the world's longest engagement. So they have left Europe and they have gone over here to England, and from there they're going to go up into Scotland, and eventually Victor is going to go by himself, leaving Henry Clerval behind, although they're going to meet up in like 2 months or so. He's going up here to the Orkney Islands, this very northernmost, very remote, beautiful area, but not a lot of people. In fact, you can read the description there for what's going on. And he's going to use this place to create a female monster. This is from some of the art I'm looking at today is from an artist, Bernie Wrightson, and it's quite striking. Anyhow, this is the depiction of Victor creating his first monster, but he has returned to the lab, so to speak. He's brought his laboratory stuff, the chemical stuff. He's brought along whatever parts, however he did that. He's brought that along as well to do that, and he's getting to work on it. It's interesting that chapter 3 begins with this. It says, I sat one evening in my laboratory. The sun had set, and the moon was just rising from the sea. I had not sufficient light for my employment. I didn't have enough light. I did not have enough light for my work, and I remained idle in a pause of consideration of whether I should leave my labor for the night or hasten its conclusion by an unremitting attention to it. Basically, he's saying, listen, I was close. If I pulled an all-nighter, I think I could get this thing done. And as he sat there thinking about it, he started thinking about the deal that he had made. So he starts wondering, what happens if I do make this creature? And there's all sorts of potential problems with her. One, she might be worse than the creature that he already has. So the creature had been violent, right? He had burned a house, but more importantly, he had murdered a 5-year-old child and then set up an innocent woman to take the blame for his crime. He is a person who has anger issues, right? So he might create a person who might be even more violent and more angry than him. There's no way he could know for sure. She might not leave mankind. The creature had promised that he would leave, and he had promised for her that she would leave, but he can't make that promise for her. She might decide that she's going to stick around. The fact of the matter is, they might not like each other. The monster thinks that he's going to create the love of his life, and they're going to fall in love, I guess, and run off to South America and never have anything to do with people anymore. But they might not like each other. She might be grossed out by his appearance. Everybody else is, including the creature himself, thinks he's ugly. So that might not work out. It's possible she might at some point leave him. Which would make him alone again. And we don't want him alone, because when the creature's alone, the creature gets angry. And there's also the fact that, and now this is made explicit in this chapter, they might make babies. So what happens when they make babies? He calls them, there's the potential for a race of devils. That's what Victor says. Of course, he thinks that's Victor's thinking. But a race of devils. He says this race of devils, in fact, might compete with the human race, might beat the human race, and future generations might look at Victor and think that he was the monster because he had set this monster race against the human race. So he talks about how he had been fooled initially by the arguments that the monster had made. He really ponders this. And right at this moment, when he's thinking about that, the monster looks in the window. And that freaks Frankenstein out because the monster looks malicious. He looks like awful. That's bad English. But anyhow, he scares him. And so what Victor Frankenstein does is at that moment, he tears up the female creation. Victor Frankenstein kills Eve before she even lives. And the monster is going to react horrifically to this. He cries out, he leaves. Why doesn't the monster kill Victor Frankenstein? You'll have to read for that answer for yourself, but it's interesting that he doesn't. The monster comes back. He tries to get Victor Frankenstein to create a female, but Frankenstein is firm. He won't do it. The monster threatens him, leaves, and the monster sails away. But he'll be back. The most ominous threat is that he tells them that I will be with you on your wedding night. Victor understands that to be a threat against Victor. We'll have to see if Victor is correct about that. And so what happens then is that Victor closes up shop. He throws his stuff in a boat and he goes out into the sea and he dumps the evidence. He falls asleep. Victor likes to fall asleep. He must have been good at napping. He falls asleep, and many, many hours later, he winds up on a beach in Ireland. Now, here's the deal. I tell you, it's not possible. There's too much distance between the Orkney Islands and where he winds up. He couldn't do it. Mary Shelley's wrong, but anyhow, just go with it. It's fiction. So he winds up on this beautiful beach in Ireland, but the people of Ireland, who are wonderful people, are not happy to see him. Not happy to see him at all because, as you read, they have found a body. Just shortly enough before Victor arrives, they had found a body, and the body was of a 25-year-old guy, good-looking guy, it says. And if you're looking up here in this part from chapter 4, it says that he had black mark of fingers on his neck, so he's been strangled to death. And when Victor hears that, he knows what's happened, because that's what happened with William. That's the modus operandi, I guess you could say, of the monsters. He strangles people. But what is also interesting, and what really causes these people to wonder, so here's this guy, he shows up in a boat, and someone else had seen someone in a boat drop something off, blah, blah, blah. You can read it for yourself. But what's interesting, of course, and really odd, is that the body was not wet. He wasn't drowned. He's been strangled. His clothes are dry. And also he was warm. In fact, the villagers tried to warm him up to resuscitate him. So what does that mean, y'all? Think about that. This isn't a dead body that's been hauled across Scotland and across the water. This is a body that had just recently died. So somehow the monster had managed to keep Henry Clerval alive. Maybe he drugged him or something like that. But then at the end, really at the very end of this incident, he strangles him and puts him on the beach. He's still warm to the touch. What's happened then, as we're seeing here, is this, it's reminiscent of what happened with Justine and William. The monster had set up Justine to take the fall for the monster killing William. And here now the monster is setting up Victor for the fall after the monster has killed Henry Clerval. In fact, it's interesting, in one part in chapter 4, Victor says, at one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty and suffer the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. So he reflects on Justine as well. I will say I'm a little disappointed in this chapter because it sets itself up for a trial where Victor's going to go on trial for this, and it's a trial that really never actually happens. His father arrives, and his father takes him home, and they've found some evidence that clears him well enough. But the big deal, of course, is the monster's reach on Victor and his family. He is still going to follow him, and the most ominous line is, again, the most famous line probably in the novel, I will be with you on your wedding night. We'll have to see how that's going to work out in the last part of the novel. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.